Just me today, guys.
Yeah, right. Where'd all the fun be?
Star of the show, here it comes. Mr. Friendly.
Hello, hello, hello. Yeah, it's even on my mic. Didn't
And
they
on
go,
your
didn't I?
top.
Yeah. I like everyone to know, so then that way they can all be very, very surprised when the truth is very much the opposite. If you try and touch my dog without permission, especially the dachshund. We work as a team then.
Yeah, but it's just attack.
Yeah. Both sides, and then we'll see what happens.
You are the lovely one, though.
That's what I would say anyway.
Yeah.
But
Petter, I'm looking at you.
oh, name dropped and everything.
Name dropping. So harsh, so mean.
Almost like Dog Daddy.
Be your dog's daddy.
What?
Or your dog's mummy.
Didn't we just turn this into ASMR here?
I am. It's more seductive that way.
I'm not sure where you're going with the show at this point.
I'm going to... When you got a dog, why did you not think about the relationship? Because I know that people look at me when I say, oh yeah, I'm the mum. Like, I'm obviously the mum. But being a trainer, that always gets frowned upon because we don't want to... You say the big word?
Humanize our dogs. You didn't put it in the right context. You wrote it right, I'll say it.
Why can't you say anthropomorphize?
Anthropomorphize. So you interrupted me just so I couldn't say the word, and now we're going to continue.
But how did I phrase it wrong?
Because you've worded it so I could use humanize and get away with it.
What does it mean?
Could
Say
you?
it.
Anthropomorphize.
Say it again.
Anthropomorphize.
Say it again.
Anthropomorphize.
And that gets frowned upon. But when I say I'm my dog's mum, I don't mean literally treating her like a human baby. She's my family. She is literally my everything. I don't have children. Potentially never will. My dogs are my everything. They are literally my life. And I think it gets frowned upon when, you have trainers online going, be your dog's leader, or what else? Alpha.
Yeah, pack leader. You need to make sure that your dog's not dominating you. You need to control the space for you. But I think on top of that as well, I think that a lot of the owners of dogs that call themselves their dog's mummy and their dog's daddy, they also do stigmatise the terms a bit, because there are some that really, really go for it.
And that's why we're here. I think we should all just choose a term that's really nice, and it means that we like our dogs. Wink, wink to our last episode. Go watch it now.
I think that we should be our dog's best friends.
Aww.
And that we should basically have a relationship that's of a mutual respect. And
Cute.
I don't think that it should be this whole thing of because even as a parent, a lot of owners that claim that they're their dog's mum and dad, that to them means that they then need to enforce structure and punishment, and they need to make sure that if the dog's not doing something right, they need to be told off for it. And basically going to more extremes than just saying no and showing them the right way to do things.
Yeah, I think there's so many trainers that then escalate it to you can't say no, you can't do... Like, it doesn't matter. You can say whatever the hell you want, basically. But it's what it means. I think I use the word no because I find that it helps me. It helps me interrupt a behaviour more than anything. It's just seen as this bad word. But I could say bananas, which is very common actually. If you get an owner to pick a kid, it's always bananas.
It is, or some sort of fruit. They want to show off how healthy they are.
I know, yeah. And it's one of those things where I really don't like the people make it seem like we have to be one way or another, but we don't look at the relationship itself. I think the term leader, for example, I know that's a really common one with some more of the popular YouTubers, I'd say. I don't see anything wrong with that term per se, but when I work with my clients, especially the more reactive dogs, I really love the word guidance. I think guiding your dog and helping them and showing them the right way to do things is so important. We don't have to punish behaviour, especially that most of it, in those more extreme cases that you see people work with, it's driven by emotion. And
I think a lot of them, I think you can almost see it. Like, I mean, you get like the big YouTubers and stuff, and like some of them, like, let's go with like the name like Ben Rear, they'll almost walk the dog, and the dog has no idea what's being done. Like they've decided they're going to go for a loose lead walk. The dog doesn't know that because it doesn't know what loose lead walking means or how it's supposed to go. So it'll start walking and it will do its inherent thing of pulling because it moves faster than us. And this will annoy the trainer because the dog's not doing what it's supposed to. And that means they get a correction, they get a pop. And they'll then pair it with the word no. And suddenly, the word no has this giant, like you hurt your dog. When actually, if you use it in a guiding method and a guiding way of just being like, okay, if the behaviour wasn't done right, if the reward that you were going to get isn't going to come, you're going to get the word no, and we're just going to try again. And I think that over time the dog then learns, because there is an element of like testing and pushing boundaries. And
well, you don't move forward, do you? If the dog's pulling and you don't want the dog to pull, you don't move forward with the dog when it's pulling.
No.
And that alone doesn't then provide the reinforcement, and all of a sudden you're providing reinforcement when you like a behaviour. And I mean, I'm not going to say it's that simple with every dog, but that's generally the equation you start with, and then you do whatever you need to do. And I don't want to put a label on myself when it comes to being a trainer. I very much just want to work with kindness. But I think when I see trainers escalate behaviour from 0 to these extremes, and the trainer that you not so subtly mentioned.
Oh, Ben Rear?
Yeah.
I love Ben Rear. He's my boss.
He is not Martin's boss.
Work for myself.
You're such a lone wolf.
Yeah.
You tell him.
Alpha.
How?
Awoo!
Oh!
No, I'm a
I just
solo
wanna-
act,
I
and
wanna
you join
join
in.
Oh!
No, it's too late now. Right, get on with the point, because you've muscled in my pack.
Oh.
I'm over here, friendly as anything. Yeah.
It's one of those things that I don't think a dog is ever too old for rewards. I think if the dog's never been trained, I'm referring to jerk ham.
You sure?
I would say that there's no age limit on reinforcement, because a puppy at 12 weeks could be taught the reinforcement of walking to heel, and then a dog at 3 that's never done it before, let's say they've been rescued or moved homes, and all of a sudden the owner wants them to do X, Y, and Z. They're not too old for treats just because they're age. They don't know any better.
It irritates me, that one, though. Because it's like, everyone, even if they choose a positive reinforcement route, so many owners will say, when do I get to stop giving treats? And so many trainers will go, if we do this, we'll get to the point where we can use treats less, faster. And I'm just like, why is that the shortcut you want to take?
I don't get why that's the goal. I would say I don't really need food ever with my dogs.
It's nice at that point.
I'd quite confidently say I don't need food. I don't need toys. Like, we have a really solid relationship, and they understand structure, and I think I've utilised environmental reinforcers really well, which allows me to have reinforcement out in the world. But I still take food out whenever I can. I love giving my dogs rewards. I love training with them. It's not about getting rid of the reward, it's about it not necessarily being necessary. But that also comes with time.
But I think it's also nicer that way, because then it's not like you're having to, like, because at the very beginning there is an element of like, I like that, I'll pay you, I like that, I'll pay you, and that makes sense, and I don't have a problem with that.
And don't be shy to pay your puppies.
Yeah.
Like, let them grow up with treats.
I think that having the guidance of a trainer, because it's very easy to get into the habit of being too nurturing and rewarding things, and then questioning yourself, what did I reward there? Because I think a lot of times when we check an owner and say, what did you just reward there? And then they go, Don't know really. And usually it's they've rewarded jumping or they've rewarded something inadvertently, and then they're like, oh, I see the problem now. But
also remembering what rewards we hold. I mean, I often say this quite extremely, but let's say I'm working with a Vizsla, never done before, and the dog is jumping, and I said to the owner, if I got a stick and every time the dog jumped, I'd beat the dog with a stick, would the dog stop jumping? And realistically, probably not, because the fun of the jump alone is there. They have attention, so something as simple as eye contact with some dogs, they're very sensitive sometimes, that can be super reinforcing. The touch that came from that, the attention, what happened after, where the behaviour leads, can be reinforcing. And therefore, it's not just the treat, it's not the loving fuss that we think of. And obviously there's a very extreme reaction. Please don't beat your dogs with sticks. But
I'm glad you finally said it. Some of the owners, the next week we meet them and they're like, oh my god.
They have their little whips.
Yeah, it's not great. But
it's one of those things that we just don't think. We think that we hold all this power in these treats. And actually, there's walking to heel. I mean, the sniffing. Get a spaniel and don't pay them for walking to heel. I mean...
But even like, again, come back to it, I guess, it's like, you get some owners and it's almost like inflation because they give the dog so many for nothing, and then suddenly food doesn't mean anything anymore because it's become such a norm in their walk of, oh, every time I take a step I'm going to get some food, even if I move out of position and then come back I'll get rewarded for it. So at the end of the day, the communication that we have with the food that we give of, I like that, here you go, in the same way as when you're a kid and let's say you do really well at school and your parents like, oh, let's go out for a meal as a treat, that holds value. Then you're like, oh yes, I've made it. Like, going to my favourite restaurant, it's all about the fact that I did really well and that's a nice moment. And that's what it is for the dogs. If you treat in a semi-consistent way, that's what it'll mean to the dog. But if you then had a kid where every day you got the kid takeaway or its favourite meal and things like that, they're not going to be excited about it. They're not going to. Yeah, it's the norm. That's what happens. And suddenly, even if you're spending a lot of money on these treats, if that's all you're ever doing with the dog for every single behaviour, it doesn't mean anything. We have owners that put expensive treats in the dog's food, like in a bowl, and it's like, the inflation of that food, it means nothing. It's worthless anymore. And they're like, well, why isn't this working? I'm paying a lot of money. It's like, you've paid a lot of money, but then you've paid a lot of money to completely squander the value that you could have had as a potential.
But on top of that, what's the expectation? Then you've got a dog that's got an expectation that it gets fed for every sit. That in the house, what happens out and about when they can go chase a leaf? I mean, that's really fun apparently. Not that I do that. But...
I think one of the hardest dogs that we've ever worked with was a textbook case of this, because the owners had made food worthless because they'd rewarded almost every step the dog took.
Is that Goldie?
Yes.
I was thinking Jack Terrier.
But then they'd raised the value of other things. Like the dog was basically allowed a couple rooms in the house where the dog could go, but every day, once a day, it would be giving a tour of the rest of the house on a lead. So suddenly the value of the rest of the house, because it's this novel thing that happened every now and then, became this exciting experience, and they wondered why things weren't getting better, and it's because of the exposure and how they did it. So for instance, again, our Dachshund, he was very much like bed trained, given a boundary, taught that kind of thing, because again, his start to life wasn't so straightforward, and being a rescue, you kind of want to put in a bit more structure in that way to make them feel more comfortable. But then when we wanted to get him used to the sofa, initially when we let him on the sofa, it was the most exciting thing ever. My goodness, Snickers could not be more excited about the thought of going on the sofa. It would make him squeal, it would make him kind of get almost like lose control of that kind of inwardness. And it's really sweet, but at the same time, it's not, in the long run, it wouldn't have been healthy, because suddenly he's going to have this really overstimulated response to the sofa, and then the sofa's not going to be a place of calm. It's exciting.
But then I know that I wouldn't want him digging up the sofa. I don't want him chewing on the zippers from the pillows. I don't want him scavenging whenever we're eating. And those behaviours came along with arousal. So naturally we wanted to make sure that we knew what these little things led to first, so we could prevent that, and we wouldn't have to then prevent or fix the scavenging or the chewing or the digging, and it's just looking a little bit further ahead. I always think that we look into the future when we work with owners. So recently we worked with a Labrador, and he was quite young still, but you could just see that reactivity coming in, and I think it's quite funny because whenever I say it, the dog almost does it in that session, and it started to begin. We started getting more of the barking and more of that kind of stuff, and you think, okay, well, this is where it stems from. It's not a new behaviour, it's just showing differently. So I think that's really important to acknowledge.
And yeah, I think dog training is seen as like almost like, sometimes to owners is mind blowing. It's like witchcraft, but it's patterns. And I think like Ben Rear and all these other like trainers that you usually see on things like YouTube, you'd see them, but they've created this pattern, and the pattern works. But the pattern is, you used to pat a line. There is a correction that's probably a little bit too heavy-handed most of the time, and that is going to mean that the dog then doesn't do what they wanted, like what the dog was going to do beforehand. So the pattern there is you've almost shattered the pattern because you've scared the dog into doing something different, and suddenly the dog feels safe in the new pattern, so it chooses a new pattern because it knows that one doesn't result in its neck being thrown from one side of the room to the other. Probably a bit of a dramatic one, but still, it's kind of that idea of you can introduce patterns of behaviour in a calmer way. So Snickers now can come on the sofa. We just like to have him ask for permission, and then you can release him. We've got stairs for him. He runs up the stairs, and he comes on, and he usually, as soon as he lands on the sofa, he kind of plants himself and he's like, I'm comfy here, I'm
Our
fine.
dogs definitely have spots. It has been reinforced, but they enjoy it. They enjoy the structure of it, and they enjoy that pattern. Dogs love patterns. We just have to make sure we form healthy ones, like when we wake up, we go to the toilet, but not whenever the doorbell goes off, we go crazy.
And I think that's the difference, and I think that's the issue. On YouTube, you get very extreme examples. So you get the more balanced trainers that are very much like you need to basically have control of every single second of your dog's life. Every decision they make has to be done through your leadership and your decision making, and that's that. And then you kind of get more force-free, where they give the dog very little guidance.
I would say the first ones you mentioned I would call them the alphas.
But then you've got ones that are like, they're usually less big on YouTube because they're unable to get results as fast, but their results
They
are
also don't set the dogs up.
Yeah.
So I know where I've worked for many how do I phrase this? Basically, I've worked in the industry, and things like before footage are very, very important and very, very big, and I still acknowledge that. Is why we got that for Cece, for example. You have to show your work, but I know for a fact that setting dogs up to fail in that sense and then hammering them for 3 hours to fix the problem, it's not what you think. You're not achieving what you think you are, and it's just really terrible. So I just would not go down. And then it goes into body language, doesn't it? I mean, that's something that you point out all the time to clients, is they'll show a video or they'll watch something and it'll be cute and it'll be funny, or it'll be like this incredible transformation, and it's a dog wagging its tail, thriving, just absolutely just doing its thing and owning it, and then the cut clip is the dog tail down, stopping at the sudden jerks of the person, turning beautifully, absolutely, staying by the side. But then do we have to pick between happiness and desired behaviour? I mean, I just don't think we do.
I just think I think YouTube misses that middle ground though, because there's that, the alphas, but then the force-free trainers that are semi-big on there. It's almost like sometimes they'll try and train something. It's not quite
They're the
going.
grandparents.
Yeah,
nannies.
It's not quite going how they wanted it to go. Let's say they're doing door manners, and they wanted to begin with. They wanted the dog to sit, to wait, for them to walk through the door, then release the dog. It comes to them, and then they walk off. That's how they start the session. That's how they tell you it should be. But halfway through, they're like, the dog doesn't want to sit. Okay, cool. And then suddenly it's like, almost towards the end, they're like, okay, as long as the dog stops for a second and then goes. That's fine. So they change the criteria very quickly, and there's an element of you have to make it very individual. But for them, it's almost a sense of they never want to say to the dog, "You could do this differently." They just want to say, "Do you know what? You did it. Let's do it that way now, and let's go that way." And I think that sets a lot of dogs up to struggle because suddenly there is no guidance and there is no one there to help you through things. It's you do everything. And then they'll be reactive, and suddenly the methods that they're using aren't working because they can't just give up on reactivity, because if they want it to go away, they really need to work on it. I think there's just that middle ground of guiding them, and their fear of the word no is the one that gets me, because no can be so powerful, and it doesn't have to mean you pair it with a kick or a punch. It just, or even just a
whack
pop.
with a stick.
Yeah, it just, you could just say no and then say,
oh,
and then show them what you do want.
Thanks.
Yeah. So then show them what you do want, and then from there, reward. And then suddenly you've got a dog that understands, oh, that wasn't right, but this is. And then when you do those things, like the amount of dogs that we meet where suddenly they'll be doing a wait, the owner will ask them to wait, they'll take a few steps, the dog will then start moving, they'll say no. The dog automatically seems to go back to that same spot because they're like, okay, clearly you didn't do the right thing. Let's go back because I want the reward of the play, the fuss, the love, and everything that comes with that.
The no's not a tell-off, it's an interrupter. And I think if you go in with it in that mindset, it's different. Like, I use at all the time just because it comes naturally to me, and I don't think I'm very scary when I say it.
No.
But it's just, for me, it's out the blue. I don't go around going in my free time. I really don't, I promise. So it's one of those things that if I then do it, my dogs are like, what are you doing? And then all of a sudden it becomes an interruption, and then we go back to what we were doing. The other stuff is just irrelevant. So I will call them the grannies and the nannies, because they just want to treat the dog, but they're not there for the long run. They're just they're there through the good times, but then when things get hard, they're gone.
Yeah.
So Martin, big question. Are you ready? How do you become the daddy?
I think you just basically, you accept the dog again, we go back to last week, you figure out what your dog is, who they are, what makes them unique, what makes them like their breed, and then from there you pick the things that you want to have reinforced. So let's say like with Snickers and the sofa. Okay, I want you to be calm when you go on the sofa, so you reinforce calm. And it's not done through a case of using punishment, it's just gone, if he's getting a bit too chaotic on the sofa, maybe the sofa's a bit overwhelming at that point, so let's go do some bed training, have you calm back down, and then we'll try again later. And at other times, it's almost embracing the things that they enjoy, but doing it in a manner that you can find acceptable and almost you can put on cue. So lots of dogs dig in the garden, and quite often it's fun, but it's because they haven't got enough mental stimulation. But what you can do is buy a sandpit.
Or teach nail trims, like that's what Snickers loves. Once we started the behaviour, do you remember?
Yeah.
He literally offered it on everything, and it was the cutest thing because he loves digging things up and ripping things apart. And like I said, I really wouldn't want him doing that on the sofa because our sofas see enough action. But it's one of those things that when you could just see the fulfillment and the joy, and we didn't have to pay him for the behaviour very long because he just loves it so much. And now the activity alone pays him so much, and that doesn't mean that we stop reinforcing, but it's what he wants to do.
But equally, because we put it on cue, at the same time, if he does it on his own volition, and let's say he does it on the sofa, if we say no, suddenly he understands oh, that wasn't correct. You don't want me to do that right now. And sometimes that can be enough for him to then be like, I'll settle down. And then suddenly he's chilled out again. But if he's really struggling with that, it's the ability to then say, right, this isn't working. I want you to understand two things differently. So let's change the model that we're going for. Let's do some bed training for an hour. Have you nice and chilled. Again, once you talk bed training, it doesn't mean you're constantly rewarding the bed. But to begin with, yes. But right now, if I send him to bed, he's pretty chilled on there because the bed's got enough of a reinforcement history, because I've guided him on the fact of actually being on the bed is the thing that you want to do. And I think that's where...
It's safe. I mean, he hates people. He hates the doorbell. He hates anything, basically. And he was so scared of life. And now he's so confident that he will, if he's ever unsure, he'll run to bed straight away. And that's when it's almost a cue for us. He's trained us, which is a good thing, by the way, that so often we have a Ring doorbell. And I would say it's pretty accurate. It's pretty good at picking things up. But sometimes I'm like, there's someone here, because you can tell by Snick's behaviour that actually there's a bit of, there's stress, he's gone to bed. So it's really beneficial to teach them, because when it feels good, when it's based on emotions, it's really, really incredible. And I think the way to become your dog's parents in a good and ethical way is creating natural consequences that aren't ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because yes, if I speed and I get caught, there's some higher power that makes me suffer a consequence for that. But I'm pretty fine with that, because the boundaries are pretty clear. I'm told what to do. I'm told what speed to go. And
you're also taught beforehand through driving lessons, this is what you do, this is how you go here, this is what you do there.
What are driving lessons? It's one of those things that I know for a fact that if I show my dogs a better way, they will be happier. And with natural consequences, it's so simple. Because for me, the no is like when you use good instead of yes. It's that duration marker that keeps the dog there. To me, I'll say no if Snick digs on the sofa, and I'll send him to bed. And that's done. But with time, I just say no and I see what he does. And if he stops digging, I don't send him anywhere. Because it's had the effect, yeah. And all of a sudden, because I know he would rather be on the sofa than on his bed, I will still pay him for being on the bed. He's not done anything wrong. I'm just showing him, do you know what? This doesn't include, if you do this, it means this. It doesn't mean you get to just go along and do that. It's the same for Recall. I mean, my collie, he is my dearest, most lovable Sherlock. He's a special soul. And I'd say it's been about a year now, but he went back on the long line for a few weeks. Because one day he just went. He was like, I'm going. And I called him and he was like, I don't think so. And I called him again and again, which don't do that, don't repeat cues. But it was one of those things that I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not letting that become reinforcing. And it was a natural consequence of, I have a long line, so then if he decides to ignore Recall, he can't then go do something stupid. And that's not necessarily because I'm over controlling or that I have this need of my dog complying with everything, but it's also keeping everybody else safe. And I know that he doesn't like other dogs running up to him very much, so why would I let him do that to other dogs? Because he's very curious. He's a bit of a troublemaker. He likes to investigate, but on his terms, and everybody is meant to know his rules. They don't. He really is a lovely dog. I always make him out to be this like terrible nutcase.
It's like how owners make about you.
I'm lovely.
Ask Petter.
Petter, tell them, please. It's one of those things that I think as long as we give natural consequences, whether they would happen naturally without us. So obviously if I was in the room and he dug on the sofa and then went to sleep, like there's no one there, he's not going to then send himself to bed as a punishment. But it's one of those things that if we allow things to naturally make sense, then all of a sudden it's just so much more simple. And I think that's being a dog parent without making it too, oh my god, my dog's my baby, and must listen, I say this, I must do that.
A lot of what you've described is a correction though, but corrections are seen as this highly negative thing in the positive reinforcement community. And yes, the way that they've been shown is popping a dog, being overly handsy, being just really in your dog's face is too much. That is a bit of an excessive correction. But simply saying no and showing a more desired behaviour and correcting the one that you didn't like beforehand, still a correction, but no one in positive like reinforcement or force free wants to go that route, because instantly you'll have a million people comment saying balance trainer, balance trainer, balance trainer, when actually it's not. You're just training the dog, but you just can't use that sort of vocab because it's instantly met with, oh okay, you clearly are like the new version of Dog Daddy, you make your dog miserable. I
think it's very hard because when I said the word punishment, I actually felt a bit funny because I just don't use that word. I avoid it, and it is a punishment. Like if my dog doesn't recall, they'll get back on the lead. If my dog jumps out of the car without being released to jump out of the car, they're going to go back in the car. We're going to restart the process. That's a punishment. That's a natural consequence. But I think the word, it's looked at as, oh, you must now suffer. And I don't think suffering with emotional or physical pain is appropriate at all, and that's what people resort to. And I think that's when we need to start drawing the line, because I don't want to label myself for that exact reason. I mean, I think Lima is probably the closest that I would, I guess, connect with.
I think people are just too desperate to connect with a certain label, because you get to feel like you're part of a bigger thing.
I don't want to talk badly of balance trainers. I just think there's a lot of people that call themselves balance trainers that use too much compulsion, and that's where it goes wrong. I just think if you go somewhere and you see something, or someone asks you to your dog and you get a feeling that doesn't feel right, it's just wrong. Don't do it. Don't follow. Absolutely leave and go find somewhere else. And we're not everyone's trainers. I think that's what people forget. I mean, we work with so many people, and we have been so lucky to work with people around the whole of UK, and it's been one of those things where I'll very openly say, this is what I do, this is how I do it, and do you know what, if that doesn't work for you, if that's not what you want, then that's okay. That's absolutely fine, because I look for specific clients. I look for clients that are dedicated and connected with their dogs and want to form a partnership and a relationship, that don't want super quick fixes and don't see their dog as these basic assholes that live in their house that they somehow want but also don't want. And I want people to embrace their dog's personality, to love their dogs. And I just think that gets missed so much. Like, I know that we often talk about that whippet, and I won't disclose too much about that one just because it's I don't want to, but it's basically like, when you get a whippet, we did that with one of our little Daxi clients from London. The dog really hated sit and really hated down. With surface preference, it's completely normal. And actually, I know for a fact I wouldn't want to lie down on wet grass. I won't. And so we worked loads on paws up and middle. And all of a sudden the dog was thrilled. Absolutely loved paws up. Started offering the behaviour around things that would make it nervous, because I think it just liked the rush. It got the attention. It almost found a new way of communicating rather than putting itself in a really uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of like lab puppies that are really young, that are still growing, and they're growing a bit out of shape. I find they're not fully like just mature enough yet for everything to feel right and be right. And they don't want to sit all of a sudden, and the owner thinks, oh, you know, they're defying me. No, your dog is just literally finding it that bit uncomfortable. So I think it's just finding things that your dog actually enjoys. And this whippet hated lying down, and this person was determined the dog has to lie down. And I mean, bringing a mat out for it was pretty good, but there's also elements of you have to pick other options, because I mean, whippets, bless them, incredible dogs, but they have their quirks, they have their preferences. And it's like Vizsla owners in this time of year, I'm bringing out a mat. I can't speak. A mat.
As often as possible.
Yeah, because the dog is, especially a puppy that's not used to it all, it's not going to lie down. It's not going to lie down on wet grass. And if it does, great, pay it like crazy. But it's one of those things that you have to learn through positives. And let's say it does lie down on the grass and then it feels really horrible. You've now created a really negative association with the cue. And then you're going to get avoidance and displacement. And can we please stop calling displacement a behavioural issue? Because I'm not saying that it can't be, but I'm saying that if you have a retriever that is eating everyone's clothes when they enter the door, teaching it to go get a toy and fulfill its natural desires can also mean that the dog naturally learns how to de-stress themselves, and then all of a sudden the behaviour is still there, but it's in a good way, and the dog feels comfortable, you feel comfortable, and everybody's happy.
100%. And I think that on top of that, I think...
I'm just going to move, I don't want to interrupt your sound.
I think almost rolling back a bit, I think picking a training style that actually suits you is going to be more beneficial to you in the long term, because even though I necessarily don't always agree with the way that people train, if you're going to actually... Like, for instance, we worked with a client, we did it positive, reinforcement based, and We did that for a while, and they made progress. But then they were like, okay, I'm quite happy here. But then they went to a gun dog trainer, and they're in love with it. They love it. They take the dog shooting. They do all those different bits, and for them, it's so much more rewarding because their dog, even though I think it does enjoy a lot of things because it's not as intense and balanced as other gun dog training kind of classes.
They're not holding them up in the air and choking them out.
And they're actually kind of doing things in a way that I would align with more often than not. So,
well, I'm going to interrupt that because to me, this is where a lot of the debates happen now, and it's why I just get so scared because everyone hates the fact that there's these opinions and all this stuff. But realistically, right, if you take a dog that was bred to go and work in the field and retrieve and do all the goodness, and then yes, you add a bit of aversive to that, but all of a sudden the dog is now free to go work and do everything and understand it, I would say that dog is going to be happier than going the very, very positive route and almost them being stuck in the I can never do this because I'm never good enough. And I think achieving all that through positive reinforcement and going into the field and doing it that way. I'm not talking about your average Labrador owner working or non-working line, getting recall from a dog. That's not the same. It's having it go shooting with the owner and do all that stuff. I think that's when there has to be an understanding, and I think in the ideal world I would 100% not use aversives if I can help it, but I genuinely think that dog is happier doing that style of training and doing the puppy stuff and all the puppy basics with us and doing all that good stuff and then moving on into the field and doing it that way than anything else, because that dog is very happy, and it might have not been the route I took, but there has to be a welfare thing, because that dog would have I've potentially been stuck on a long line because the owner is very busy, and I mean that's a topic for a different day, but it's that scale, isn't it?
He learnt it all on a long line, and actually the way he now reinforces it and understands it because he now puts it into that kind of mindset. For him, that's all it was a mindset change of, oh, do you know what? I'd actually quite like to go like clay pigeon shooting. I'd love to have my dog there with me, and suddenly he had a drive, he had almost like a dream, and it gave him that focus and that clarity, and suddenly he pushed harder and was more consistent because he understood that the end goal for him was more beneficial.
Whereas, they have a hobby and a passion together. And many people don't.
Whereas a lot of owners, they don't go for that. They just kind of go, I guess I should get them trained. They're not really in it. They get told they have to do things a certain way. It doesn't align with the things that they want to do. And even though sometimes their life is a bit of an inconsistency, it just means that they almost like fall out of training because at the end of the day, they don't want to do those things. And some trainers do make everything very strict. They do even force free and positive reinforcement. They make sure that your dog is a cookie cutter dog where everything is the same, and that's not fun either. And that's again almost straying into that kind of like
I would
being unfair
say
to the owner.
What you've said is exactly right, because you have the harsher side, very correction based, that makes it super hard for the dog, and then you get the ultra positive that makes it super hard on the owner. And then where's the middle ground? Because that's what we're about, I would say. And for me, the well-being of the dog is the top priority. I want the dog to be happy, and I want welfare to be the most important thing. And I think a lot of our owners, let's say we work with a puppy and they say, oh, I don't want him to jump. How do I make him stop jumping? And we say, well, why don't you want him to jump? Not for any other reason, but to know what's causing the behaviour and where the owner's fears lie. And a lot of them don't have an answer. And I can tell you right now, my dogs jump. Absolutely, 100%. Do they jump randomly at people? No, they jump on cue at me. But it's these rules that were formed, that we have these robots, and actually I just think it's unnecessary the way it's done.
Again, it came down to guidance though. Like again, with the same reason as we taught Snickers to go to bed, and then from there we then moved it to the sofa. It's that way we could have some control over it, but not in an negatively controlling way, because actually we can say to them, yeah, you can jump up, but you can almost come up to us and we can ask, and you can start to understand your dog and when they want to jump up, and sometimes it's a bit of a displacement, and you can understand that something's going on in the environment and go from there.
Yeah, you get the reactive dogs that jump every time they don't know what else to do. It's kind of their burst of stress, and the owner is way more focused on fixing that than building up the confidence. And you think, well, where do I go from here? Because that's not at all the focus that we need to have.
So yeah, I think that it's almost figuring out what you want more, first and foremost, figuring out how you want to get there, and then from there, just being mindful about what it is that does the training that the trainer you're speaking to align with what you want? Does the trainer seem like they have the dog's interest at heart, or do they just seem like they want to get results so they can say, look, your dog now does sit, its ears are pinned back and it won't wag its tail, and for about 10 minutes afterwards it won't even take food, but when you ask it to sit, oh boy does it sit, and from there you get the results.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the way I would say is, if you had someone that took care of your child and they said, well, my approach for them when we're on a road is every time they run or try to run in front of a car, I grab them, I tell them off, and then we carry on walking. Would you say that's really going to teach the child about safety? Is that really going to make the child not do the behaviour, or is the behaviour not going to happen around that particular person? Because that gets missed a lot, I think.
Or have you taught the child that everything's safe unless you physically get involved? Because I think that's something that a lot of trainers teach dogs as well, which is, unless we physically interact with you, you're not going to have to do anything, but the second we interact with you, you're going to do it. And then that way, touch becomes really aversive for the dog. And a lot of owners don't look at that.
Collar grabs, absolutely. One of the biggest things I see now is dogs being so shy of grabbing a collar or grabbing a harness. And it's not even something that we do commonly. It's like, oh, we're changing equipment around, or we're checking literally if the collar's tight enough. And it's, the dog gets very, very scared and they won't move. And to me, I train collar grabs from day one. I wouldn't even say I'd really use it with my dog, if I'm honest, but it's there if I need it. My dog's a muzzle trained for the vet, because what if I need it one day? I just don't.
One of them we do need it.
Well, yeah. But it's one of those things that I just think it's ridiculous, the way we act and what we expect and how we do things, where there are so many other options and so many other ways to look at it. And it's so much deeper than, my dog jumps, I don't want it to jump. My dog pulls, I don't want it to pull. Because we never look at what's driving the dog, and we don't ever look at what we want either. I think we think, okay, well, my dog pulls, now it must walk to heel. Or does it?
Or we just think, and this goes kind of back to the title, a lot of owners and a lot of trainers think, what do I want here? And how hard am I going to have to push to get what I want? Instead of thinking, all right, well, we're in the middle of a town centre. The dog's never been here before. This is a bit much. So maybe let's start off on the outskirts and really move in. Whereas a lot of those...
sniff around first before I expect this immaculate heel work.
A lot of those trainers are, I want to walk through town. I don't want you to pull. And I want you to listen when I ask you to do something. And so that means that the trip to town is a nightmare for the dog, because it's basically a world of pain, discomfort, and overwhelmed, mixed with stress.
Let's say you've got a really resilient dog that really couldn't give two anythings about what you're doing, right? Because there are dogs out there that will literally say, F you, I'm still doing it, I don't care what you do. And in those moments, what are you really teaching them? Which is, you're fighting. We are the reason the lead is tight. It's not the world. It's not because they're doing something wrong. We are the fight. We are the enemy of the dog. So the second we step outside, all the dog wants is to get away from us. And why would we want that? I mean, I hold the fun. That's what I want my dogs to think. I want my dogs to enjoy me over everything else. And I think that's, that could be seen as very, I guess, controlling and almost unrealistic. And I would say so. I mean, my retriever, me or a lake, probably a lake. Mm-hmm. But I know that I have a sense of control because we have a relationship. And it's not about being delusional about what to expect from my dogs and the type of behaviour we want, because they need agency. They need to be able to make choices to then be able to listen.
100%. I think that if we don't give them those things and give them a choice, but almost steer them down the certain choice that we want them to make, then it's a life of control, and no one wants that. It's humans, we don't want that, but we think to ourselves, our dog, we don't. I think a lot of owners don't even think about it, but if they did, they'd go, well, I don't want that, so why would my dog want that? And suddenly from there, everything changes and everything opens up in their eyes because they see the world differently in their dog's eyes.
If my friend said to me, every time I want to go outside the front door to take my wheelie bin out, I have to ask my other half if I can step outside, I would be like, that's really controlling. Like, that there's a worry there, you know? And that was just a really random example from the top of my head, but we do it with a lot. If, let's say, the stigma of if a boyfriend tells a girlfriend how to dress, then it's like, you know, it's not good. It's very controlling. They can't express themselves, etc. But where do we put that with dogs? Where does a dog get to say, but I just really want to sniff? And it's not about doing things that are ridiculous, like, oh yeah, no, have the front door open all the time so the dog can go out whenever they want. No, that's ridiculous. That's unsafe. But I'm saying safe outlets for things. If your dog wants to dig, buy them a sandpit, teach them to dig on cue somewhere, or go to the beach and let them dig in sand. Like, let them have fun, let them have their say, because then it's not a fight.
No, and then suddenly your relationship changes dramatically, and the dog doesn't see you as someone that holds things back, but actually brings things forward, and suddenly they want to be around you, and you'll probably see a dramatic difference in the way that your dog interacts with you. But it's all because of the fact you suddenly thought to yourself, how do I facilitate their needs so they can meet mine? And suddenly you have a relationship, you have a best friend, and you have a dog that is willing to do things for you and will offer things for you because you will offer things for them. And I think sometimes being realistic and understanding that you can't have a relationship that is all, I want this, I want that, and you're not getting anything because you are the dog and you have to have what I give you, and if I don't want to give you those things, I won't. Then you're actually going to find that actually there isn't going to be a lot there because you don't bring anything for that dog. If you don't want to take treats when you're out on walks, suddenly your dog's not going to get any reinforcement there. We've met plenty of owners that are like, the idea of fussing their dog outside is like sacrilege. They're like, oh no, I do that indoors. And it's like, well, why? Because actually the dog can find that really reinforcing. And some owners are like, well, why am I going to call it good boy all the time? I expect it to do that. And suddenly you're taking away all those things because you don't think the dog would want that. Or even if it does want that, tough, because actually I don't want to give that. And they wonder why the things change.
There is an element of that is okay, like the jumping. A lot of people don't like jumping and therefore they don't want their dogs to jump. That's fine. And I'm not even saying that you have to give the dog necessarily a jumping outlet, because that's not the case. But really dig in and think, why is my dog jumping? Because a lot of the time your dog is overly friendly, has not been socialised properly, you've not set them up for success, and on top of that they have needs that haven't been met, such as doing impulse toy work. I think solves so many problems. If anyone takes anything away from this, is go play with your dog. Literally just go play with your dog. Do nothing else. Stop walking them, stop hand feeding, stop whatever you've been told, go play with your dog. And
where possible, play with your dog in a way that keeps the fun around you, because so many owners would hear that and go,
don't chuck a ball.
Just play, tug, do something like that. Even have them chase you, like things like that. It builds a lot.
Best emergency cue, I would say, and people talk about emergency recall and stuff, and yeah, it's all great, but the best cue you can teach your dog is if you run the other way, they need to follow. Because I can tell you right now that is going to work better than anything else if there is a life or death situation.
100%.
Yeah. I like how much you agreed with me there.
Yeah.
It really sells it.
I think it's important.
Yeah, I think it's important too.
Yeah. I think that be who you want to be for your dog, but don't follow someone else's dogma just because you think that there is no, like, you cannot do things a different way, because you'll probably find that you're not really who your dog should be. And also, don't be put off by certain trainers and think, okay, well, I don't think dog trainers are nice, because they're not all the same, and all of them are very different.
But it's just like all our clients, they're so different. They all come from their different bubbles, And I would say we have a pretty amazing relationship with everyone we work with.
Mm-hmm.
And
You just cater to their needs.
yeah, and you listen to them as people. And if we do the same to dogs, then we'll be fine.
Because even like some owners, you need to be a bit more like, look, we're sending you this. You need to actually pay attention to it. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Well, you have the owners that you need to almost check in and make sure they know you're there, so they feel motivated to do the work. And then you have owners that find that really stressful, and instead you just send and make sure that they're okay. You don't even mention the work they have to do, and all of a sudden they feel more comfortable with messaging you because it doesn't bring anxiety. It's just changing how you interact with those around you, and if we do that for everyone and everything around, I think we'll be pretty happy.
Yeah, and I think that your dogs will too.
So let's be daddies and mummies.
Let's be best friends.
Oh, so cute.